Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into the world of behavioral economics.
Oh, cool.
And we're using excerpts from Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow.
Okay, great.
So we're really going to try to explore how our minds really make decisions
Right.
and why those decisions often clash with
Yeah.
the idea of perfect rationality.
You know, it's a fascinating area
Right.
because it reveals that even the smartest people
Yeah.
can be swayed by these subtle factors they're not even aware of.
Right. It's like these hidden biases are secretly influencing us
Exactly.
without us even realizing it.
Yeah, and one of the most powerful biases is
Okay.
what Kahneman calls loss aversion.
Okay.
So imagine this. You have a chance to win $100.
Oh, okay.
There's also a risk of losing $50.
Mm.
Would you take that gamble?
I think a lot of people would hesitate even though the potential gain is there.
Yeah.
And I would probably think twice.
Yeah, and that's loss aversion at work. Research suggests that we actually feel the pain of a loss
Oh, wow.
about twice as strongly as we feel the pleasure of an equal gain.
So it's not just about the numbers.
Right.
It's about how those numbers make us feel.
Precisely, yeah.
Interesting.
And this has a huge impact on our decisions,
Okay.
especially when it comes to things like investing.
Oh, okay.
You know, Kahneman gives the example of what's called the disposition effect,
Oh,
where people are more likely to sell winning stocks
oh,
than losing ones,
oh, wow. So even if that might not be the best.
even if it's not the smartest financial move.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like we're so afraid of locking in that loss,
Right.
even if it's just on paper,
yeah,
that we're making decisions that might not be in our best financial interest long term.
exactly.
So how does loss aversion play out
Yeah.
in other areas of life?
Think about salary negotiations.
Okay.
Many people are very hesitant to ask for a raise, even if they deserve it,
Right.
because they're afraid of that potential loss,
Oh, yeah, the rejection.
the possibility of being rejected. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
we're so focused on avoiding that negative outcome
Right.
that we miss out on the potential gains
Of what's,
a higher salary.
yeah, it's like playing it too safe.
Yeah, that's true.
And this can also play out in personal relationships too, you know.
Oh, right, yeah, like staying in,
Sometimes we stay in unhappy relationships
yeah,
for way too long
because we're afraid of ending it.
because we're afraid of the loss, the pain of ending things.
That's a really interesting point. It's like we're so focused on avoiding the pain of a breakup
Right.
that we don't even consider the potential happiness we might find
Exactly.
if we moved on.
Yeah.
Wow.
And another fascinating concept that Kahneman explores is mental accounting.
Mental accounting, okay.
Turns out we don't just have bank accounts.
Yeah.
We have these mental accounts in our minds.
Yeah, like we mentally categorize our money even though it's all the same. Yeah. I'm guilty of that for sure.
We all do it.
Yeah.
But, you know, as logical as it might seem,
Okay.
this mental accounting can actually lead to some pretty irrational choices.
Okay, like how, can you give us an example?
Let's say you've been saving up for a new phone.
Okay.
Okay, so you have the money set aside in a mental account
Yeah.
labeled New Phone Fund.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Then your friend invites you to a concert that's happening next week.
Okay, and the concert ticket
Yeah.
costs about the same as the phone you've been saving for.
Exactly, yeah.
This is where it gets tricky.
Right, so you might be hesitant to spend that new phone fund money
Right.
on the concert ticket,
Even though I really want to go.
even though you really want to go.
And I know I could just wait a little longer to get the phone.
Yeah, it's like the money is somehow
Yeah.
earmarked for that specific purpose,
Yeah.
even though it's all interchangeable in the end.
Yeah. You're so right. I've definitely fallen into that trap myself.
Yeah,
Like, I'll put off buying something I need because the money's mentally allocated for something else.
yeah, it's a common experience. And another example is how we treat money we win or find unexpectedly.
Okay.
So we might be more likely to spend that
Oh, like found money.
found money, yeah, more frivolously,
Yeah.
even if you're normally very careful with our finances,
That's so interesting. It's
Yeah.
like the way we label the money
right?
influences how we value it
Yeah,
and how we're willing to spend it.
exactly.
So it's not just about the money itself,
Right.
but the story we tell ourselves
Yeah,
about where that money came from.
exactly. Now,
Mhm.
let's dive into one of the most mind-blowing concepts in Kahneman's book,
Okay.
the difference between our experiencing self
Okay.
and our remembering self.
Okay. This is the part that really made me stop and think.
Yeah, it's like,
It's like we have these two separate selves
yeah,
that are constantly interacting and sometimes even conflicting with each other.
it's a crucial distinction, and it can help explain why we make choices that seem to contradict
Yeah.
our own happiness.
Yeah.
So the experiencing self is the one living in the moment,
Right.
feeling all the highs and lows as they happen.
So like always in the present moment.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there's the remembering self,
Okay.
which comes in later
Okay.
to reflect on those experiences
Okay.
and make decisions based on those memories.
But here's the catch.
Right.
These two selves don't always agree.
Exactly. Right.
Our memories aren't always
Yeah.
like perfect recordings of what actually happened.
They're influenced by all sorts of biases and distortions.
Right. And this can lead to us making choices that might not actually be in our best interest.
Right.
Like
That a classic example.
the colonoscopy,
Colonoscopy study, yeah.
where patients rated the whole experience less painful
Yeah.
if the ending was less painful, even if it was longer.
Exactly. The peak end rule is at play here. Yeah, we tend to judge experiences based on the most intense point at the
Right.
very end.
Rather than the experience as a whole.
Exactly.
So it's like we're editing our memories to fit a certain narrative,
That's nice.
even if that narrative doesn't accurately reflect
Yeah.
the full experience.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this can lead us to making choices
Right.
based on those edited memories.
Yeah.
Rather than what our experiencing selves actually went through.
So how can we make sure we're making choices that are aligned with
Right. That's a great question.
our true desires and values?
Yeah.
If our memories can be so unreliable, how do we even know what will truly make us happy?
That's a question that Kahneman explores in depth.
Okay.
One of the key insights is that
Okay.
we often fall prey to what he calls the focusing illusion.
Focusing illusion.
Like we tend to overestimate the impact of certain factors on our happiness
Okay.
while neglecting other equally important factors.
So it's like we're so focused on
Right.
one particular aspect of our lives.
Right? Like our job or our relationship status,
Yeah.
that we lose sight of the bigger picture.
Yeah, and that can lead us to making choices that
Exactly.
might not actually improve our overall well-being.
Right. We might chase after that promotion thinking it'll make us happy,
Yeah.
but then find that the added stress and responsibility
Yeah.
actually diminish our quality of life.
So it's not just about
Yeah.
achieving certain goals
Right.
or milestones. It's about cultivating a sense of contentment
Yeah,
and well-being in our everyday lives.
absolutely.
Wow.
And that involves paying attention to our actual experiences,
Okay.
not just our expectations
Yeah.
or assumptions about what should make us happy.
Yeah.
One way to do this
Yeah.
is to practice mindfulness,
Okay.
to become more aware of our thoughts and feelings
All right.
in the present moment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
By being more present and more attuned to our experiences,
Yeah.
we can start to identify the things that truly bring us joy and fulfillment.
Now, another powerful bias that can really warp our judgments
Okay.
is what Kahneman calls framing.
Framing. Okay.
So the way choices are presented
Okay.
can dramatically affect our decisions,
Okay.
even if the underlying options are objectively the same.
So can you give us an example?
Yeah, imagine there's a new treatment for a disease
Okay.
that affects 600 people.
Okay.
You have two options.
Okay.
Option A will save 200 people for sure.
Okay.
Option B has a 1/3 chance of saving all 600 people, but a 2/3 chance of saving no one.
Oh, okay.
Which option would you choose?
That's a tough choice, but I think I'd go with option A.
Okay,
At least you're guaranteed to save some people.
that's what most people choose.
Yeah.
But now consider this.
Okay.
Option A means that 400 people will die.
Okay.
Option B has a 1/3 chance of no one dying
Right.
and a 2/3 chance of all 600 people dying.
Wait, so those are the same choices?
Exactly.
Just framed differently?
Nick.
And yet, when the options are framed in terms of losses,
Right.
people are more likely to choose the riskier option,
Yeah.
even though it's objectively the same.
It's the same gamble.
Wow.
But just by changing the way the choices are presented,
Yeah,
it can completely flip our preferences.
that's incredible.
And this isn't just limited to hypothetical scenarios.
Oh, okay.
Think about organ donation.
Okay.
Countries with an opt-out system,
Okay.
where you have to actively choose not to donate,
Right.
have significantly higher donation rates
Oh, wow.
than opt-in countries,
Interesting.
where you have to actively choose to donate.
So it's the same choice.
Same choice, different framing, huge impact.
Wow. So it's not just about making rational choices.
Right.
It's also about recognizing how our choices are being influenced
Exactly.
by the way they're presented to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really powerful insight.
And this has implications for all sorts of areas,
Right.
from marketing to public policy.
Yeah.
You know, by understanding the power of framing,
Right.
we can create environments
Yes.
that nudge people towards making choices
Yeah.
that are beneficial for themselves and for society.
It's like we have this incredible opportunity
Yeah.
to design systems that make it easier for people to make
Yes.
good choices.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious about this idea of the hedonometer.
The hedonometer, yeah.
What is a hedonometer?
It's this hypothetical device
Okay.
that could measure a person's moment-by-moment experience
Okay.
of pleasure and pain.
Oh, like a happiness meter?
Yeah, like a happiness
It
meter.
tracks all the ups and
It
downs.
tracks all the ups and downs throughout the day.
Oh, that would be fascinating.
Yeah,
So we could get like a real-time reading of how we're feeling.
exactly.
Okay.
And it can provide valuable insights into what activities and experiences truly bring us joy
Oh, wait.
and which ones we might be better off avoiding.
But wouldn't that take the spontaneity out of life?
That's a good point, yeah.
What if we become too obsessed
Yeah,
with maximizing our hedonometer readings
right,
and end up missing out on experiences that might not always feel good,
right.
but are ultimately meaningful?
Yeah, it's not about
Yeah.
becoming slaves to our hedonometers or
Yeah,
trying to
right.
force ourselves to be happy all the time.
Right.
It's more about using this information
Okay.
as a tool for self-awareness,
Okay.
for understanding what truly contributes to our well-being.
Right. And we might find that certain activities that we thought we enjoyed
Exactly.
actually don't bring us as much pleasure as we thought.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's about challenging our assumptions
Yeah.
and being more intentional
Yeah.
about how we spend our time and energy.
So it's not about
Yeah.
like having a hedonometer strapped to our wrist.
Right.
It's just about paying attention.
It's about paying attention to our moment-to-moment experiences.
Right.
And trying to be more mindful.
And be more mindful of how we're feeling
Okay.
throughout the day.
Yeah.
And by tuning in to our experiencing selves,
Yeah.
we can start to make choices
Yeah.
that are more aligned with our true desires
Okay.
for happiness and fulfillment.
Now, I'm curious about this whole idea of income
Yeah.
and happiness.
Right.
It's like we often hear that money can't buy happiness, but
yeah.
is that really true?
Well, the relationship between income and happiness
Okay.
is more complex than that.
Okay.
While it's true that money can't buy happiness outright,
Okay.
research suggests that there is a correlation between income and well-being.
So higher income
Yeah.
does generally lead to higher levels of happiness.
To a certain extent, yeah.
Yeah.
Having enough money to meet our basic needs
Right.
and to feel financially secure is essential for well-being.
Okay.
But the interesting thing is,
Okay.
the relationship between money and happiness
Okay.
isn't linear.
Meaning, does it plateau at a certain point?
Exactly.
Okay.
So Kahneman and his team found
Uh-huh.
that beyond a certain income level,
Yeah.
more money doesn't actually translate
Oh, okay.
to more experienced well-being.
So there's like a point of diminishing returns when it comes to
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
wealth and happiness.
Yeah.
Okay.
Beyond a certain threshold, chasing even greater wealth doesn't seem to move the needle on our moment-to-moment happiness.
That's really counterintuitive,
Yeah, it is.
especially in a society that often equates success
Right.
with wealth.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like we're constantly told that we need to make more money
right.
to be happy.
It's easy to fall into that trap.
Yeah.
But Kahneman's work suggests that we might be better off focusing on
Okay.
other factors that contribute to well-being,
Okay, like what?
like strong relationships,
Okay.
meaningful work,
Okay.
and a sense of purpose.
Okay. So it's about recognizing
Right.
that true wealth isn't just about our bank account balance.
It's about the richness of our experiences
Right.
and the connections we make with others.
Yeah, and it's about finding ways to align
Yeah,
our values and our goals with our daily actions.
exactly.
So that we're living in a way that feels authentic and fulfilling,
Yeah,
regardless of our income level.
exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a really important message,
Yeah.
especially in today's world.
Right. It's about questioning those messages
Right,
and defining success on our own terms
right.
in a way that aligns with our values
Yeah.
and our aspirations for a good life.
Now, this whole idea of priming,
Yeah, priming.
it's one of those psychological phenomena that really make you realize
Yeah.
how much is going on beneath the surface of our conscious awareness.
Exactly. So priming is essentially
Mhm.
how our minds are constantly being shaped by subtle cues and associations
Yeah.
that we might not even realize are at play.
Okay.
So our previous experiences and even our current environment
Yeah.
can actually influence our thoughts and actions
Wow.
in very subtle ways.
It's like our minds are constantly making connections.
Right.
Linking things together, even if
Right.
those connections aren't
Yeah.
always conscious or logical.
Exactly. And these connections can have
Yeah.
a real impact on our behavior.
Okay.
For example, there's a classic experiment
Okay.
where participants were exposed to words related to old age.
Oh, like Florida
But
and
Florida, yeah.
bingo and things like that.
Wrinkle, bingo, yeah.
Yeah.
And those words actually made them walk slower.
They did, really?
Yeah.
That's wild.
It is wild.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show how these subtle cues
Right.
can actually activate certain concepts in our minds.
Okay.
And those activated concepts
Right.
can then influence our behavior
Without us even realizing it.
without us even realizing it.
Wow, it's like our subconscious is pulling the strings.
Right, it is.
Are there other examples of priming at work?
Another experiment involved priming participants
Okay.
with words related to money.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
What happened there?
Turns out that the money-primed participants
Okay.
became more independent and less helpful.
Really?
Yeah.
So just thinking about money, even unconsciously, can
Yeah.
make us more self-reliant,
Yeah.
less likely to lend a hand.
Exactly. And it suggests that money
Okay.
might be more than just a currency.
Yeah.
It might also be a powerful symbol that can activate
Right.
certain values and behavioral patterns.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how much of our behavior is
Valid.
driven by these subtle, unconscious influences.
It's a question researchers are still exploring.
Yeah.
But one thing is clear.
Yeah.
Priming is a real phenomenon
Yeah.
that can have a significant impact
Yeah.
on our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions.
So how can we be more aware
Right. Well,
of these subtle influences?
it's about paying attention
Okay.
to the information we're consuming, the environments we're in,
Okay.
and the people we're interacting with.
Okay.
We need to be more mindful
Yeah.
of the cues and associations that might be shaping our thinking
Right.
and be willing to question those influences.
So it's like we need to become
Yeah.
more critical thinkers.
Exactly.
Not just about the information we're presented with,
Yeah.
but also about our own internal processes.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that involves engaging our system too.
Right.
That slower, more deliberate system of thinking
Right.
to override those impulsive reactions
Right.
and make more conscious choices.
So it's not about eliminating system one altogether.
Right.
It's about finding a balance
Exactly.
between our intuitive and rational minds.
Yeah.
Now, this other
That's
bias,
the halo effect.
yeah, it's this
Right.
tendency to,
It's this tendency to allow our initial impressions of someone
Right.
or something
right.
to color our perception of everything else about them.
So it's like if we find someone attractive,
Yeah.
we're more likely to assume
Yeah.
that they're intelligent or trustworthy.
Exactly.
Even
Even though those qualities aren't necessarily related.
Right. And this can also work in the opposite direction.
That's true.
If we have a negative first impression of someone, we might be more likely to view their actions in a negative light,
Yeah.
even if those actions are perfectly innocent.
Exactly.
And this bias can have a big impact on
right.
how we perceive people,
Yeah.
products,
Yeah.
even entire companies.
Right.
So we need to be aware of the halo effect
Yeah.
and try to judge things based on their actual merits,
Yeah.
not just on our initial gut feeling.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
It's about being more objective,
Right.
more nuanced in our assessments,
Right.
and recognizing that
Yeah.
our first impressions can sometimes be misleading.
Yeah. So it's another example of where engaging system two
Right, exactly.
can be helpful.
Yeah, by slowing down. And considering all the available information,
Right.
we can overcome the halo effect
Yeah.
and make more accurate judgments.
Now, I'm curious about this other bias that Kahneman explores,
Okay.
the WYSIAD principle.
WYSIAD stands for What You See Is All There Is.
Okay.
It describes how our minds tend to focus on the information
Okay.
that's readily available to us,
Right.
neglecting the information that's missing or harder to access.
So we're basing our judgments on a limited set of data,
Exactly.
ignoring the bigger picture.
Yeah,
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
it can be.
Yeah?
And it can lead to all sorts of errors in thinking,
Right.
especially when we're trying to make sense of complex situations
Right.
or make decisions
Right.
with incomplete information.
So can you give an example of
Yeah.
WYSIAD at work?
Think about how we form opinions about people.
Okay.
We often base our judgments
Yeah.
on just a few interactions or
Okay.
observations,
Right.
without considering all the other aspects of their personality
Right.
that we haven't had a chance to see.
So it's like we're judging a book by its cover.
Exactly.
Or even worse, by just a glimpse of a single page.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
We're filling in the blanks.
Yeah.
With assumptions based on limited information.
Right.
Which can lead to some pretty inaccurate judgments.
So how can we avoid
Yeah.
falling into the WI-SIAD trap?
It's about recognizing that our perspective is always limited.
Okay.
And being willing to seek out more information
Okay.
before forming conclusions.
So being more humble in our judgment.
Exactly.
Recognizing that we don't always have the full picture.
Right. Yeah.
Now, before we move on, I
Yeah.
want to touch on this other bias
Yeah.
that's closely related to cognitive ease.
Okay.
The availability heuristic.
The availability heuristic.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating mental shortcut that can sometimes lead us astray.
Okay.
Essentially, we use the availability heuristic to judge the likelihood of an event based on how easily examples of that event come to mind.
So if we can easily think of examples of something happening,
Right.
we assume it must be more common or more likely to happen in the future.
Exactly. And this can be problematic because our memories
Yeah.
aren't always an accurate reflection of reality.
Right.
Yeah.
Our memories can be influenced by vividness,
Right.
recency, emotional intensity,
Exactly.
which can make certain events seem more likely
Right.
than they actually are.
Yeah, so if you've recently seen a news report about a shark attack,
Right, exactly.
you might overestimate the likelihood of being attacked by a shark.
Even though statistically it's
Yeah.
a very rare occurrence.
Exactly.
Right.
The availability heuristic can also influence our judgments
Oh, okay.
about other people.
Okay.
So let's say we have a negative experience with someone
Okay.
from a particular group.
Yeah.
We might be more likely to generalize that experience
Right.
and assume that everyone from that group is the same,
Even though that's obviously not true.
even though it's obviously not true.
Yeah, it's like we're letting one isolated incident
Yeah,
color our perception of an entire group of people.
exactly.
And that's really dangerous.
It can be, yeah.
Yeah.
The availability heuristic can contribute to stereotypes
Right.
and prejudice
Yeah.
as we make judgments about individuals
Right.
based on limited or emotionally charged experiences.
So how can we overcome
This bias.
being aware of the availability heuristic
Right.
and challenging our assumptions,
Okay.
especially when they're based on
Right.
limited or emotionally charged experiences?
Right. Welcome back to the deep dive. Last time we were talking about cognitive ease and how it can make us more susceptible to persuasive messages. Isn't that right?
Yeah, it really is amazing how these subtle factors can shape our thinking.
You know, I remember reading about that experiment
Yeah.
where people were primed with words related to money.
And then they were less likely to help someone who dropped their papers.
Yeah.
It's just crazy how just thinking about money
Yeah.
can make us more self-focused.
It's a classic example of priming,
Yeah.
how it can affect our behavior
Right.
in really subtle but powerful ways.
Yeah. It makes you wonder what other kinds of priming effects are happening
Right.
all the time
Yeah.
without us even realizing it.
That's the fascinating part. It's like we're constantly being influenced
Yeah.
by our surroundings, the information we consume, the people we interact with.
It's a little unsettling when you think about it.
Yeah.
Like we don't have as much control over our own minds.
Well, I wouldn't say we have no control,
Right.
but I think it's important to be aware of these influences
Right.
so we can make more conscious choices.
Right. Be more intentional with our lives.
Exactly.
Not just let ourselves be passively shaped
Right.
by these external forces.
Yeah, be more mindful.
Now, I'm curious about how cognitive ease relates to creativity. To creativity.
Yeah, it seems like there's this assumption that we need to be in a state of
Yeah.
intense focus and effort
Right.
to come up with creative ideas.
Yeah, that's a common belief. But
Okay.
Kahneman's research suggests that might not be entirely accurate.
Oh.
He actually argues that when our cognitive ease is high,
Okay.
when we're feeling relaxed and mentally comfortable,
Yeah.
we're actually more likely to have those creative insights.
So it's not about forcing ourselves to be creative.
Right.
It's about creating the right mental conditions
Exactly.
for creativity to flourish.
When we're in that state of cognitive ease,
Okay.
our minds are more open to making connections
Right.
between seemingly unrelated concepts.
So instead of stressing ourselves out,
Yeah.
trying to come up with the next big idea,
Right.
we might be better off taking a walk in nature
Exactly.
or listening to some music.
That's the idea.
Yeah, give ourselves permission
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
step away from the constant demands of productivity.
And cultivate a more playful approach to thinking.
It's about creating space
Yeah.
for those aha moments to happen.
Now, shifting gears a bit,
Sure.
I'm curious about what Kahneman has to say about happiness.
Happiness.
It seems like everyone's chasing happiness,
Yeah.
but it can be such an elusive concept.
It's definitely a complex experience.
Right.
And one of the key insights from Kahneman's work is that
Okay.
we're not always the best judges of what will make us happy.
So we might think that getting that promotion or buying that new car
Right.
will bring us lasting happiness.
Right.
But then the novelty wears off.
And we end up just as dissatisfied as before.
Kahneman calls these effective forecasting errors.
Yeah.
So we mispredict how we'll actually feel in the future
Right.
because we're not aware of the factors that
Yeah.
truly contribute to our well-being.
So it's not just about achieving certain goals.
Right.
Or acquiring certain possessions.
Right. It's about cultivating that sense of
Yeah, it's about,
contentment and fulfillment.
yeah, in our daily lives.
Okay. So being more present,
Exactly.
more mindful of how we're feeling
Yeah.
in the moment.
And less focused on chasing some future state of happiness.
Right. Because happiness is not a destination.
Exactly. It's a journey.
It's a journey. It's about creating a life that's
Yeah.
rich in experiences
Big and small.
that bring us joy.
That make us feel connected
Yeah.
to something larger than ourselves.
Yeah, it's about finding those moments of joy
Yeah.
in the everyday rather than waiting for some big event to make us
Yeah.
happy.
Now, one of the tools that Kahneman and his colleagues developed
Okay.
to study happiness
Okay.
is something called the day reconstruction method,
Day reconstruction method.
or
Wow.
DRM.
DRM. Okay.
It's essentially a way to get a more detailed and nuanced understanding of how people experience their days.
Okay, so how does it work?
Participants are asked to break down their day into episodes, kind of like scenes in a movie,
Okay.
and then they describe what they were doing,
Okay.
who they were with,
Okay.
how they felt during each episode.
So it's like a combination of time tracking
Yeah, exactly.
and emotional journaling.
It's a really valuable tool
Yeah.
for understanding the factors that contribute to well-being.
And it's revealed some interesting patterns.
It has, yeah.
What kind of patterns?
One thing that surprised me is how much time
Okay.
people actually spend in unpleasant states.
Really?
Yeah, on average, about a third of people's waking hours
A third.
are spent feeling stressed,
Okay.
bored, frustrated, unhappy.
Wow, that's a lot of time spent feeling bad.
It is.
Yeah.
And it really highlights the importance of
Okay.
identifying those activities and situations that
Yeah.
tend to drain our energy and bring us down,
Yeah.
and then finding ways to minimize those experiences.
So it's not just about seeking out the positive experiences.
Yeah.
It's also about minimizing the negative ones.
Exactly, and being more aware of how we're actually spending our time and energy.
We might be surprised to discover that certain activities we thought we enjoyed
Right.
are actually not that fulfilling,
And vice versa.
and vice versa.
Yeah,
So it's about challenging our assumptions,
exactly.
being more intentional about
Yeah.
how we structure our days.
Right.
Now, I'm curious about what Kahneman has to say
Sure.
about the relationship between money and happiness.
Money and happiness, right?
We often hear that money can't buy happiness.
Yeah.
But is that really true?
Well, the relationship between income and happiness
Okay.
is more nuanced
Okay.
than that.
Right.
While it's true that money can't buy happiness outright,
Right.
there is a correlation
Okay.
between income and well-being.
So having more money does generally lead to
Yeah.
greater levels of happiness.
To a certain extent, yes.
Okay.
Having enough money to meet our basic needs
Right.
and to feel financially secure
Right.
is definitely essential for well-being.
But what's interesting is that relationship
Yeah.
between money and happiness
Right.
isn't linear.
Exactly.
So is there a point where having more money
yeah.
doesn't make us any happier?
Yeah, Kahneman and his team found
Okay.
that beyond a certain income level,
Oh,
more money doesn't actually translate
okay.
to more experienced well-being.
Oh, I see.
So like how happy people feel on a day-to-day basis.
So there's a point of diminishing returns when it comes to wealth and happiness.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
Beyond a certain threshold, chasing even greater wealth
Right.
doesn't seem to move the needle
Yeah.
on our moment-to-moment happiness.
And that's really counterintuitive,
Yeah.
especially in a society that equates success with wealth.
Right.
You know, it's like we're constantly being told that
Yeah.
we need to make more money to be happy.
Yeah, it's easy to fall into that trap.
But Kahneman's work suggests we might be better off focusing on other factors.
Exactly.
Like strong relationship, meaningful work, a sense of purpose.
Right.
So it's about recognizing that true wealth
Yeah.
isn't just about our bank account balance.
It's about the richness of our experiences.
Right.
The connections we make with others.
And it's about aligning our values and goals
Exactly.
with our daily actions.
So that we're living in a way
Yeah.
that feels authentic and fulfilling.
Regardless of our income level.
Exactly.
I think that's a really important message,
Yeah.
especially in today's world.
Yeah,
That we're constantly bombarded with messages about material success.
it's about questioning those messages.
Yeah.
And defining success on our own terms.
Right. In a way that aligns with our values.
Exactly.
And our aspirations for a good life.
Now, I'm curious about
Right.
what Kahneman has to say about
Okay.
making decisions in situations where we don't have all the information.
Right, because it seems like we're often forced to make choices
Right.
with incomplete data or in situations where the outcome is uncertain. Yeah.
And in those situations, we often rely on heuristics,
Heuristics, okay.
which are mental shortcuts that allow us to make quick judgments and decisions
Okay.
without having to process
Right.
all the available information.
Well, it's like our brains are trying to save energy by using these shortcuts
Yeah.
to navigate complex situations.
And while heuristics can be helpful in many situations,
Right.
they can also lead to biases
Right.
and errors in judgment.
Can you give us an example of
Sure.
a heuristic that might lead us astray?
One classic example is the representativeness heuristic.
Representativeness heuristic, okay.
This is where we judge the likelihood of
Right.
something belonging to a particular category
Okay.
based on how well it represents
Okay.
or prototype or stereotype
Yeah.
of that category.
So, for instance, if we meet someone who is very outgoing and loves to party,
Right.
we might assume they're more likely to be a salesperson
Right.
than a librarian, even though statistically there are way more librarians in the world.
Exactly. We're letting our stereotype of a salesperson
Right.
overshadow the base rate probability,
Okay.
which is the actual frequency of salespeople
Right.
in the population.
So we're letting our intuition
Right.
override the statistical realities.
Yeah. And that can be a recipe for making bad decisions.
It can't, yeah.
And it highlights the importance of being aware of these heuristics and learning how to use them effectively.
So it's not about eliminating heuristics altogether.
Right.
It's about understanding.
It's an understanding their strengths and weaknesses.
Right. So we can use them
Yeah.
more effectively.
Exactly. They can be valuable tools
Right.
for navigating complex situations.
But we need to be aware of their limitations.
Exactly.
And engage our system two thinking when necessary.
Yeah, finding that balance between intuition and analysis,
Right.
efficiency and accuracy.
Now, I'm curious about what Kahneman has to say about the role of emotions in decision-making. Yeah, it seems like emotions are often portrayed as
Yeah.
the enemy of rational thought.
Right.
But is that really true?
Well, the relationship between emotions and reason
Okay.
is more complex than that.
Okay.
Emotions play a vital role in our lives,
Right.
and they can actually enhance our decision-making.
So it's not about suppressing our emotions or trying to make decisions solely based on logic.
Exactly. Emotions can provide us
Okay.
with valuable information
Okay.
about our values, our priorities,
Okay.
and our gut feelings about a particular situation.
So we shouldn't ignore our emotions.
Right.
But we also need to be aware of how they might be influencing us.
Exactly. Emotions can be powerful motivators,
Right.
but they can also lead us astray if we're not careful.
Can you give us an example of
Sure.
how emotions might influence our decisions?
Let's say you're considering buying a new car.
Okay.
You might be drawn to a particular model
Yeah.
because it makes you feel excited or prestigious. But those emotions might be clouding your judgment
Okay.
and preventing you from considering more practical factors,
Oh, okay. Right.
like fuel efficiency or reliability.
So it's about finding that balance
Exactly.
between our heart and our head,
Yeah.
our emotional responses,
Right.
and our rational considerations.
Exactly. We need to be aware of both
Right.
and find ways to integrate them into our decision-making.
Use our emotions as
Yep.
valuable data points,
Yeah.
but not letting them completely override
Exactly.
your rational judgment.
Now, another important aspect of Kahneman's work
Okay.
is his exploration of prospect theory.
Prospect theory. Okay.
This theory challenges the traditional economic model
Okay.
of rational decision-making
Okay.
by showing how our choices are influenced by
Okay.
our perceptions of gains and losses.
So it's not just about maximizing our overall utility.
Exactly.
It's also about how we frame those gains and losses
Exactly.
in our minds.
Prospect theory suggests that we're more sensitive to losses
Okay.
than to gains.
Right.
So losing a certain amount of money
Okay.
feels more painful
Okay.
than gaining the same amount feels pleasurable.
Yeah. It hurts more to lose
Exactly.
than it feels good to win.
And this loss aversion can have a big impact on our decisions,
Okay.
especially when it comes to risk-taking.
Okay.
So we might be more likely to avoid a sure loss,
Right.
even if it means missing out on a potential gain.
It's not just about the objective value of the outcome.
Exactly.
It's about our subjective experience.
It's about our subjective experience.
Of those gains and losses.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's really highlighting how important it is to understand
Right.
how our emotional responses
Yeah.
can shape our choices.
Yeah. We're not always perfectly rational decision makers,
Right.
and our emotions can play a significant role.
Now let's talk about Kahneman's concept
Okay.
of the two selves.
The two selves. Yeah.
It's like we have these two separate selves that are constantly interacting.
It's a fascinating concept.
Yeah.
It challenges our assumptions about how we experience and remember our lives.
So what are those two selves?
Well, Kahneman argues that there's a distinction between
Okay.
our experiencing self and our remembering self.
So it's like those are constantly interacting and sometimes even...
Right. It's a crucial distinction,
Yeah.
and it can help explain why we make choices that seem to contradict
Okay.
our own happiness.
Okay.
The experiencing self is the one living in the moment,
Right.
feeling all the highs and lows as they happen.
So like always in the present moment.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there's the remembering self, which
Okay.
comes in later,
Okay.
to reflect on those experiences
All right.
and make decisions based on those memories.
But here's the catch.
Right.
These two selves don't always agree.
Exactly right.
Our memories aren't always like perfect recordings of what actually happened.
They're influenced by all sorts of biases and distortions.
Right. And this can lead to us making choices that might not actually be in our best interests.
Right.
Like
that classic example.
the
Colonoscopy study, yeah.
where patients rated the whole experience less painful
Yeah,
if the ending was less painful, even if it was longer.
exactly. The peak end rule is at play here.
Okay.
Yeah. We tend to judge experiences based on the most intense point
Right.
in the very end.
Rather than the experience as a whole.
Exactly.
So it's like we're editing our memories to fit a certain narrative,
Precisely.
even if that narrative doesn't accurately reflect
Yeah.
the full experience.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this can lead us to making choices
Right.
based on those edited memories.
Yeah.
Rather than what our experiencing cells actually went through.
So how can we make sure we're making choices that are aligned with
Right. That's a great question.
our true desires and values?
Yeah.
If our memories can be so unreliable, how do we even know what will truly make us happy?
That's a question that Kahneman explores in depth.
Okay.
One of the key insights is that
Okay.
we often fall prey to what he calls the focusing illusion.
Focusing illusion. Okay.
We tend to overestimate the impact of certain factors on our happiness
Okay.
while neglecting other equally important factors.
So it's like we're so focused on
Yeah.
one particular aspect of our lives.
Right, like our job or our relationship status,
Yeah.
that we lose sight of the bigger picture.
Yeah. And that can lead us to making choices that might not actually improve our overall well-being.
Right, we might chase after that promotion thinking it'll make us happy,
Yeah.
but then find that the added stress and responsibility
Yeah.
actually diminish our quality of life.
So it's not just about
Yeah.
achieving certain goals
Right.
or milestones. It's about
Yeah,
cultivating a sense of contentment and
Yeah.
well-being in our everyday lives.
absolutely.
Wow.
And that involves paying attention to our actual experiences,
Okay.
not just our expectations
Right.
or assumptions about what should make us happy.
Yeah.
One way to do this is to practice mindfulness,
Okay.
to become more aware of our thoughts and feelings
Right.
in the present moment.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah,
By being more present and more attuned to our experiences,
yeah,
we can start to identify the things
right.
that truly bring us joy and fulfillment.
Now, one interesting thing about the two selves is
Okay.
it's the remembering self that ultimately makes most of our decisions.
So even though our experiencing self is the one
Yes.
living through each moment,
Yeah,
it's the remembering self that's shaping our future choices.
exactly.
And that can lead to a disconnect between what we actually enjoy
Yeah,
and what we choose to pursue.
right. We might choose a vacation based on
Right.
a few Instagram-worthy highlights.
Right. Or we might stay in a job that makes us miserable
Right.
simply because we had one moment of recognition.
Exactly. Our remembering self is drawn
Yeah.
to those peak moments and endings, and it can sometimes lead us astray.
So how do we reconcile these two selves?
Yeah, it's a great question.
How do we make sure our remembering self
Yeah.
is making choices
Yeah.
that are in line with our experiencing self's true desires?
I think it starts with awareness.
Okay.
We need to be more mindful of how our memories are shaping our choices
Okay.
and be willing to question
Yeah.
the narratives we're creating about our lives.
So we need to be more critical of our own memory.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's also about finding ways to
Okay.
bring our experiencing self and our remembering self
Right.
into greater alignment.
So that might involve practicing gratitude.
Practicing gratitude, savoring positive experiences,
Okay.
focusing on building memories
Okay.
that are truly meaningful to us.
So it's about creating a life
Yeah,
that feels rich and fulfilling in the present moment,
right.
while also building a tapestry of memories that we can cherish.
Now let's talk about another area
Okay.
where our thinking can get a bit fuzzy. Predictions.
Predictions, okay.
We often try to predict the future,
Yeah.
both in our personal lives
Right.
and in the wider world.
Yeah, but predicting the future is notoriously difficult.
It is incredibly difficult
Yeah.
to predict the future with any degree of certainty,
Right.
but we still try.
Yeah.
And we often make important decisions based on those predictions.
So what does Kahneman say about why?
Well, he highlights
Yeah.
a number of biases that can cloud our judgment.
Okay, like what?
The planning fallacy,
The planning fallacy, okay.
the illusion of validity,
Okay.
and the hindsight bias.
Okay, let's start with the planning fallacy.
Oh, yeah.
What is that exactly?
The planning fallacy is this tendency to
Yeah.
underestimate how long it will take
Okay.
to complete a task or project,
Okay.
even when we have past experience to guide us.
Oh, I'm definitely guilty of that.
Yeah,
I always think I can get things done faster
it's a very common bias.
than I actually can.
Yeah, we tend to focus on, like, the best case scenario,
Yeah.
imagining everything will go smoothly
Right.
and that there won't be any unexpected delays or setbacks.
And then reality hits and we're left scrambling to catch up.
We fail to account for all the potential problems that could arise.
Yeah.
And we overestimate our own ability to control the situation.
So how can we overcome the planning fallacy?
One strategy is to use what Kahneman calls the outside view.
Outside view, okay.
Instead of focusing on our own unique situation,
Okay.
we look at similar projects or tasks that have been completed
Okay.
and use that data to inform our predictions.
So it's about stepping outside of our
Exactly.
subjective experience and getting a more objective perspective.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's about acknowledging that
Right.
we're not always the best judges of our own abilities.
All right.
And our predictions are often influenced by wishful thinking.
Now, what about the illusion of validity?
The illusion of validity.
What is that?
It's this belief that we can accurately predict outcomes. Okay. Based on our own subjective judgments.
Right.
Even when there's little or no evidence
Right.
to support those judgments.
So we're overconfident in our own ability to
Exactly.
make sense of the world.
We might feel like we have a good understanding of a situation,
Right.
but that feeling can be misleading.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. Imagine you're interviewing candidates for a job.
Okay.
You might feel like you can accurately predict
Okay.
which candidate will be the best fit
Based on the resume and the interview.
based on their resume, their interview performance,
Right.
your own gut feeling.
But there's no guarantee that
Right.
your prediction will be accurate.
Your subjective assessment of the candidates
Right.
might be influenced by all sorts of biases.
Like the halo effect.
The halo effect, the availability heuristic,
Right.
and you might be overlooking important information.
That would challenge your judgment.
Exactly.
So how can we overcome this illusion of validity?
It's about recognizing that our intuitions are not always reliable
Right.
and that we need to be more systematic in our thinking.
So gather as much information as possible.
Gather as much information as possible. Consider multiple perspectives.
Right.
Be willing to update our beliefs when presented with new evidence.
Be more humble in our judgments.
Exactly.
Recognizing that we don't always have all the answers.
And what about the hindsight bias?
Hindsight bias. Okay.
It's this tendency to see past events
Okay.
as being more predictable
Okay.
than they actually were.
So it's like we're rewriting history
Exactly.
to fit our current understanding.
Once something has happened,
Yeah.
it's easy to look back and say,
Right.
oh, I knew that was going to happen all along.
Yeah, like we're selectively remembering
Yeah.
the information that supports.
Exactly.
Okay.
And forgetting the information that contradicts them.
Yeah.
And this can make it difficult to learn from our mistakes.
Because we're not accurately assessing our past predictions.
Exactly.
So how do we overcome this hindsight bias?
It's about being mindful of our tendency to
Okay.
rewrite history
Okay.
and actively trying to recall our original predictions
Okay.
before the event occurred,
Right.
being open to the possibility
Yeah.
that we might have been wrong,
Right.
and being willing to adjust our beliefs accordingly.
So embracing intellectual humility,
Exactly.
recognizing that our understanding of the world is always evolving.
It's a crucial step
Yeah.
towards becoming more effective thinkers and decision makers.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow.
It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing how our brains take these shortcuts,
Right.
but then those shortcuts lead us to
Yeah.
make irrational decisions.
Our brains are always trying to find the easiest path,
Right.
even if it's not the best one.
It makes you wonder how much of our behavior is driven by
Right.
these unconscious biases
Yeah.
rather than our conscious intentions.
That's a lot. Probably more than we realize.
So what does Kahneman say about how we can use these insights to improve our lives?
That's a great question.
Yeah,
He argues that by understanding the biases and illusions,
right.
we can develop strategies to overcome them.
So it's not just about being aware of them.
Right.
It's about using that awareness to change our behavior.
Awareness is the first step,
Okay.
but it's not enough.
Right.
We need tools and techniques to help us.
Okay, so can you give us an example?
Let's say you're trying to save more money,
Okay.
but you're always tempted by impulse purchases.
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
One strategy is to create a pre-commitment device.
A pre-commitment device, okay.
So this could be something simple like setting up automatic transfers
To your savings
to your
account.
savings account. Yeah.
Okay.
Or even asking a friend to hold you accountable.
So you're creating an external barrier
Exactly.
to prevent yourself from giving in.
By making it more difficult
Yeah.
to spend money impulsively.
How?
You're giving your system two a chance to take over.
Your more rational mind.
Right. Your more rational mind
Okay.
and make the decision that's in your best interest.
It's like you're outsmarting your own biases.
Exactly.
By setting up these little nudges.
And there are all sorts of other strategies we can use.
Oh, okay.
For example, to overcome the framing effect,
Right.
try reframing the problem in different ways
Sure.
to see how your preferences change.
Interesting.
If you're worried about the availability heuristic,
Okay.
actively seek out information.
Okay.
That challenges your assumptions.
So being more proactive in gathering information
Exactly.
and not just relying on what's available in our memories.
And for the anchoring effect,
Okay.
try setting a range for yourself
Okay.
before negotiating or making a decision.
So you're setting boundaries
Yeah.
to make more informed choices.
So what do you think Kahneman's work means for the future?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Like, how can these insights from behavioral economics help us design policies and
Right.
institutions and just interact with each other better?
It's a big question,
Yeah.
but I think his work has profound implications.
Yeah.
For one thing,
Okay.
it suggests we need to be more realistic
Okay.
about the limits of human rationality.
So we shouldn't just assume that people will always make
Yeah.
the best choices, even when it's in their best interest.
Exactly. We need to recognize that our
Absolutely.
decisions are influenced by all these biases.
Right. All these unconscious factors.
And this can help us design systems
Okay.
that are more forgiving of human error
That's interesting. Yeah.
and that nudge people towards better choices.
So we're creating environments
Exactly.
that take into account the reality of
Yeah.
human psychology.
Right. Rather than assuming everyone's perfectly rational.
And that applies to all sorts of things, right?
Absolutely. Everything from retirement savings plans
Okay.
to public health campaigns
Right.
to combating climate change.
So we're using these insights to create a world.
Yeah, a world that's more aligned with human nature.
I love that idea.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, using science to design systems
Exactly.
like that work with our brains, not against them.
I think that's one of the most exciting things about his work.
Yeah.
It gives us a new way to understand ourselves
Yeah.
and create a better world.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to wrap up
Yeah,
our deep dive into behavioral economics.
it's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We hope you've enjoyed this exploration of Daniel Kahneman's work.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
And we hope you've learned some valuable insights into the human mind.
Right.
Remember, we're all susceptible to these biases.
Yeah, we all have them.
But by being aware of them,
Right.
we can start to make more informed choices
Absolutely.
and create a world that's more aligned with our values and aspirations.
That's the goal.
Thanks for listening.